Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are connecting in from today. Thank you for joining today's advanced storyboard user training, where we take a deeper dive look into different aspects of storyboard to really help advance your awareness and knowledge of all the great things that storyboard can do. Of course, today's topic is incorporating gesture-based interactions into your embedded GUI application. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. Just want to let you know that today's session is being recorded. So if you need to drop off for any particular reason, or perhaps you have a colleague that you think would benefit from today's topic, it will be made available within the next 48 hours, and you will have access to that on-demand recording. And of course, anybody can actually register for it and view it after the fact. Because we are streaming across the internet, that if you run into any audio issues, typically by refreshing your screen, really resolves about 8 out of not 10 times the issues. If not, then check your audio settings on your PC. Of course, we will address all questions that you have about today's topic at the end of today's session. So please use the chat window that you have to pose your questions to us. As well as, if you haven't followed us any of our social platforms, we are active on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and of course Facebook. You can always follow us under the hashtags Crank Storyboard or GUI Development. We are lucky enough today to have Matt Love with us. He is a senior application architect here at Crank Software and has many years experience not only working with Storyboard, but working with embedded GUI applications for the micro processor and controller world. And will be going over and really kind of providing you the information that the wealth of the information of today. And of course, what we're going to be starting with is I'm going to give you a kind of an overview of Storyboard. So in case you're still fresh and new to Storyboard, or maybe someone just asks you to join this session, you're not really sure what Storyboard is, I'll cover that. And then we'll jump into how to create that multi-touch events for your users, as well as what is built in from a gesture support standpoint in Storyboard, as well as how to create some custom gestures through use of Lua scripting, and then we'll dive into your questions at the end. So, we often get asked what makes Storyboard different, and I often, my response is that Storyboard was designed to really remove the barriers or the issues that are typically associated with GUI design and development. It was purpose-built for collaboration around the UX. So really designed specifically to help developers and designers work in parallel on the GUI application, and of course, iterate with ease in the quest for the optimal end user experience. And so it has two distinct separations of design and code environment. So the front end design is decoupled from that back end logic, but has a really well-defined API that connects the two. And this really allows both designers and developers to work in parallel to update and test the app at the same time without destroying the work that the other is doing. Of course, we have a unique rapid design iteration and re-import technology, which allows you from the beginning to import files from design tools such as Photoshop or Sketch to really become the building blocks of your UI. You don't have to use design tools. You can always import the individual assets on your own and kind of build it up from scratch. But having the ability to take that from the designer's kind of workspace and kind of really then begins to build the foundation for your embedded GUI application really makes it that much more quicker and more efficient to really get to that end goal. Of course, when you're kind of, changes need to be made, maybe it's resizing or changing of the application assets like buttons, colors need to be changed. You can then re-import those updated Photoshop or Sketch files with all the actions or events that you previously established being reattached to the new ones that you've imported. We also have our unique graphical comparison tool, which really allows you to remain in control of which change content you wish to accept or deploy into the GUI application before committing those changes to the final design. And then, of course, Storyboard was really built to be platform and OS independent, really allowing you to take those developed GUI applications and deploy them onto different hardware and OS combinations, and having them work by simply using the appropriate runtime that was created by our R&D team that has been optimized for that hardware and software. And not only is Crank Software a software company, but we're also a services company, which means that if you have a need for a prototype to be developed fast for a proof of concept for key stakeholders within your organization, or maybe you have an idea for a product but not the time or the in-house resources to build it, or maybe you're even looking for ways of how you can optimize the performance of your GUI application that you built. No matter what your needs are, what you're trying to do, we have a team of storyboard designers and developers within house that are here to make your embedded project easier. We can help you from start to finish, from planning, implementation, and the maintenance of your GUI application, or even maybe placing it through rigorous testing to uncover any issues that could impact the performance of your GUI application on your final product. So we're here to help. Reach out anytime and find out how we can help you. And then, of course, if you haven't visited already, we have a wealth of resources within our help center, really designed to help you get going and continue moving on your GUI application. So we have a variety of getting started videos, which covers off the basic capabilities, a wealth of knowledge-based articles and videos, as well as other advanced user training sessions that we've done in the past. So if you haven't visited out, I recommend that maybe after today's session, go check it out. And if you do have any suggestions, reach out to our support team. That's what we're here for. And maybe it's for something else that you want to take a deeper dive on and you want to learn about when it comes to Storyboard. Reach out, and maybe it'll be part of our next advanced user training session. And so with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Matt, and he's going to dive in with creating an intuitive UI UX using multi-touch gestures for your customers. Matt, take it away.
Oh, thanks, Scott. All right. So yeah, the idea for this training session really came from the fact that over the years, we've gotten questions from users that are more on the design side. And they're seeing the type of interactions you can do with, say, an iPhone or those type of UXs that have been coming out over the last 15 years or so. So really, they don't necessarily see what we have built into the engine to help them do that. There are a number of things that we do have, and this can help you add more natural interactions to your UI. Could reduce the clutter because now you don't need as many screens and controls on screen to give the user the ability to interact with various functions. But yeah, so to kind of help with that, we do actually have built into the engine a gesture plugin. And really what that does is interprets our various input events and then generates additional events when it detects a gesture was invoked, basically. So kind of the way this works, if you think about how your events are coming in, you really have three main input events. You've got press, release, and you have a motion event. Now, when you're talking about multi-touch, you're also going to have basically a duplicate set because for the very first touch input you give, we invoke the standard GUI press, release, motion. Beyond that, we send a additional set, which is MT press, MT release, MT motion, for every additional touch point you have. So if you're you're thinking first finger, you're going to press down, you're going to get the press. You put a second finger, you're going to get the empty press. You release your second finger, you're going to get an empty release. You release your first finger, you're going to get just a standard release. So those are the events that the gesture plugin is really looking for. Yeah, and so it really offers 4 types of gestures. There's a standard directional gesture for single finger swipes. The way this works is we lay the screen out with 8 zones, starting at the top left and then moving counterclockwise. So you get 4 on the corners and then 4 on each side. As you swipe towards that zone, it can send out the appropriate event. The built-in events are primarily for up, down, left, right, but there is functionality in the gesture plugin to allow you to define your own swipe events. So if you wanted to, swipe to, the upper right corner, and then you wanted to swipe down, you might say, I want to invoke my specialized event, and then I want to go to zone 3 and then down to zone 5. And then it would, once it detects that, it would invoke your event. Now, these are things you would have to add. We do have documentation online how to do that. I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm only going to really talk about the built-ins today. But yeah. And then on the multi-touch side, we will interpret all the multi-touch events and generate basically 3. So we have a multi-touch move, which will essentially give you the delta for the average of your multi-touch points. And it'll tell you what's the delta in the X axis and then what's the delta on the Y axis. Then for pinch, it'll interpret how far your fingers are moving towards or away from each other, and it'll provide you a scale factor. And then the rotate will detect how all your fingers are rotating, and it provides you an angle for that. So these all come through their various gesture events. I will demonstrate them afterwards, and it becomes a little bit more clear on how it all works. But that is the basics of how the gesture plugin works. Now, there are gesture actions you may want to do that are kind of beyond what we offer built in. But for that, you can always use Lua to interpret your events and inject your own custom events or your own custom interactions. So things here you could do, long presses, double taps. You can have a hold and drag, where after you've detected the drag starts, you can inject, say, events for as you move your finger. And then you can do, say, multi-touch swipes, very similar to what we can do with our directional gesture, but for multi-touch. And for that, you'd have to use the MT move gesture, and I will demonstrate that in a few minutes. But yeah, let's kind of just jump into it. This is not too difficult. It pretty much is adding in some events and then having some interaction going on. I'm going to do everything in Lua for the most part. Yes, that is the one. Okay, so I had built a little application ahead of time. And actually, maybe I should demonstrate it a little bit first. Here, share my webcam. Okay, so this is the application that I'm going to build running on a board. So on this screen, what I've added was a swipe right gesture to do a screen transition. So you can easily do that. On this screen, you can swipe left or right to go to other screens. So I can have a left gesture. And this is using the gesture plugin to send an event to detect them doing the left and right swipe. I have like a little gesture control. When I press and hold on the screen, it pops up and I can move it around. And this, I'm using the standard press and release as well as a timer to invoke this. So I say, if it's been half a second that I've held my finger down, I want to animate that. And then when I release, I have it go away. Also on this screen, I have a pinch, so I can scale my control. And so we'll start with that. Let's start with that first screen. So we go over here. We need a couple of things. For one, let's hide this gesture control because we don't want that to show up. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Actually, since I have all this done already, I'm just going to quickly copy this in. Nope, it's not letting me. Okay, I will build it myself then. So on application start, I'm just going to do a date change and I'm going to hide that. It's in my gesture layer and just going to set my alpha to 0. All right, so that's done. So the next thing we want to do is we want this right swipe. So we're going to go into our actions. We're going to look for our gesture right. We're then going to do a screen transition. And let's make it a path. Where is that? There it is. We're going to only move the layers that are different, and then we're going to move it to the left. I'm going to finish that, and then we're going to run it. I see. 1 second. Yep. There. Let's actually put that on the right screen. Actually, is that the right screen? Yes, it is. Okay. Oh, I forgot to add the screen. That's my bad. Okay. Should work a bit better now. There we go. So now we got the first interaction working, and now we can easily just add in additional ones on the other screen so we can go back and we're not stuck. And we will do a gesture left here, and then we're just going to reverse everything. Oop. I want that to go to the right. Save. And these are our basic swipe gestures. So from here, the next thing in this was to get this to animate. And I don't really know why the init is not changing. Oh, that's why. Okay. So this is probably going to work a bit better. Good, it's in the right state. Now we want to add that press and hold gesture. So for that, we do need a little bit of Lua because we need some functions for when you press and release. And I'm just going to quickly cheat a little bit because I've already done this. So I'm just going to copy some functions over from another project. And so these are just some helper functions to know whether or not I'm dragging. And then I'm going to add in, I'm going to add in my functions for my press and release. And I also need to start my long press. That is also correct. Okay. Copy. All right. So my functions here are when I get a press on the application, I'm going to invoke this function. It's going to start a timer for my long press, which is here. After half a second, it's going to call this function, which is going to reset the position of my little gesture control, and then it's going to kick off an animation to show it. So for that, need a couple of things. Need to press and release. Call into Lua, CD press, and then just double checking that I have this on the right place. Yep. And then my release, I want CB release. Okay. Now I'll try running this. So now I press, I hold, it comes up. Now if I release, it should disappear. There it goes. Now what it's missing is I can't move it around yet because there's no motion. But I can add that. So again, gotta go back to Lua because we need a function to actually handle the motion. And let me go grab my function. And what this is going to do, it's going to grab my previous X and Y coordinate. It's going to check whether or not I'm dragging, because if I'm not dragging that around, I really don't want to have it move. So you really have to hold it and then move. And then after I calculate the delta, I move the control around. Fairly basic there. And then on this side, I want to add my motion in. And I will call CB move. And we're going to save. And now I can move it around, which is great. Cool. Now, since we're on this screen and this is the pinch screen, we can add in the ability to resize it. For that, we're just going to need a function to actually take the scale factor that's going to be provided by our gesture plugin. And we're going to essentially just change the size of the outer ring of our little gesture control. And again, I'm just going to copy some functions I already created. There's a bit of error handling in here just to make sure that we don't get past any invalid scale factors. And then on top of that, I'm doing a little bit of correction that if we get a scale factor that's either too large or too small, it doesn't cause any weird behavior. So we'll ignore any odd things like that. But otherwise, it's basically this: we take the scale factor, we multiply it by our outer width for our control, which is really, if you were to take a look at what it is, it's just 3 arcs, and all of them have the same outer width for the height and width. And I'm just going to move those in and out, as well as change the size of the control so we don't clip anything. So that's pretty much it for that. And then on the application side, since we only want this to occur on our pinch screen, we're just going to add it there. Okay, 1 second. Nope. To pinch. Call Lua. And I call pinch. Right? And that's it. Now I can't demonstrate it on my computer, but I can go back to the board and I can demonstrate it here. And so we press, we get our gesture control, and now we're just getting those pinch events from the gesture plugin, and we're scaling our control a little bit. Right? So that's pretty much all that's on this screen. On this screen, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do the rotate for the same gesture control. We're going to have it move around. So for that, we're going to need another Lua function. That really is all it's going to do is take the rotation value provided by our gesture plugin, and then we're going to set this rotation variable that we have. And that's going to rotate all 3 of these. And because there's center points in the center, they're just going to move around. So my rotate function, really all it is it does a little bit of error correction to make sure we're not getting very small values. We'll add them up till we have at least a angle of 1 degree. And then we're going to apply it to our variable for our rotation. And then that's it. But first, we need to add our actual event. So rotate screen. Then we want MT rotates, CV rotate. And that's it. And now we can do this. Now, do keep in mind, this is not very polished, so the rotation might be a little rough, but as you can see, it kind of moves around as I move my fingers. Works a little better if I move both fingers. Anyway, and release. Okay, so that's that. That gets through pretty much everything except for MT move that our gesture plugin gives us. And for that, let's do a 2-finger swipe. So I have a couple of other screens over here. We'll add a transition to do that. And at this point, we're going to add a 2-finger swipe left and right to transition to different screens. So if we want to go back to our other one, press 2 fingers, move it over, and there we are. For that, it's pretty easy. First, we need our transition to get to that screen. And for that, query gesture right, and transition. Where's my path? There it is. I'm going to go to screen MT1. Again, my layers, I only want to see the difference. And then I'm going to move that to the, which one am I using? Left. Add that. Save. Right. Now we're kind of stuck here because I can't do, there's no events. But we'll add some and then we'll see it on the board. So for this, we need to go to our, actually first, I need a set of functions just to make this a bit quicker. 1 second. Just going to put some utility functions for incrementing our drag, because what we want to do is when we swipe left or right and we go beyond 250 pixels, we want to send a MT gesture left or MT gesture right, and we'll trigger our screen transitions on those. But we want to know when we're dragging. This is just to help a little bit. Now we need some functions for our actual press and release and our move events for the multi-touch. And so I will cheat a bit. I will paste them in. So MT press is going to get invoked on our second finger going down. MT release gets invoked when we release our second finger. And then MT move is anytime we have our fingers, that'll be invoked on the actual MT move event coming from the gesture plugin. So really all it's going to do is tell us what's our delta on our drag, and then we're going to increment to our progress, which is up here. And then once we go either 250 pixels to the left or 250 pixels to the right, we're going to send the right event to transition. So we need a couple of actions for this now. We can put this on the application layer for our MT move. And we want to call our MT move function. And then we need our MT press and MT release. MT press. and then our MT release. And again, I'm doing all of this on the application layer because I want it to process it for all screens. And then we're really only going to trigger the right translation on the right screen using the events that we're generating from Lua. This one is CB MT release. Oop, this one. Okay. So now if we were to run this on the board and I didn't have everything already hooked up, we would definitely be sending our two events for when we detect the swipe, gesture left and gesture right. But it wouldn't do anything because we have no transitions hooked up to it. So let's at least add in our transition to go back to our previous screen when we're on this one. So what we want is an MT gesture left. And again, this is my own custom event. It's not one that that we have. Sorry. And then I want my path. We're going to go back to our rotate screen. Again, we're pretty much going to do everything as we did before. And we're going to finish. And then at this point, we'd be able to do this. Right? Now, if we want to go to our next screen, which is going to be MT swipe 2, we just have to add in the proper event and action. So we're looking for MT gesture left at this point. Oops, sorry, right, my bad. And we're going to do our path. We're going to go to this screen. We're going to again use delta. And then since we want it to move in the opposite direction, we're just going to choose left. And so now we could go like that. And then to go back, it's really easy. At that point, since all of our gesture events are being generated, we can just go to the screen we want to transition back and add our screen transition. So, and since we want it to be a left one, we'll choose that. We'll add our path. We'll go back to MT swipe 1, delta, and then right. And then you can do this. Oops, sorry. Yeah. And that's pretty much my really basic sample. But it shows how to use all of the events that the gesture plugin will generate. And it shows how you could use some of our individual press events to do your own custom gestures, right? Because that's a custom gesture, and so is this press and hold. And that's it. Scott, I think you can take over now.
Thanks, Matt. All right, so just before we wrap up things and we jump into your questions, I just want to remind you that if you haven't visited the Help Center yet, like I said, there's a wealth of information for you to find there, plus a community where if you have any questions that you want to gain the insights from your peers within the industry, you can pose your questions there, as well as our support teams, R&D teams, and application teams all monitor the community as well, and we'll jump in and answer your questions as well. And if you haven't, this is the first time you've checked out one of our advanced user trainings for Storyboard, like I said, you can check out our past training as well as our Getting Started series videos. They can be all accessible via our website as well as on YouTube. So check those out. And with that being said, I'm going to jump into your questions here. Just open it up. And so, if you haven't posed a question, now is the time to definitely kind of pose whatever questions you have. So I have the first question here, Matt. The first question is, are there any sample Lua code repositories for multi-touch that can be accessed?
That is a good question. We do have a sample, which, hold on a second. Let me just double check. I know we have it in one of our SVN repositories, but I want to see if we ship it with the product as well.
Okay, so while you're doing that, while you're checking that out, what I'll do is I'll answer the next question is where I can find access to the past sessions. Sorry, yeah. So that if you go to our webinars page, which is accessible via our website, all our webinars, so whether it is ones with upcoming partners, whether it's one specific to Storyboard or user training, can all be accessible there. And so if you haven't registered for them before, you register for them, and then you get instant access to the on-demand sessions.
Yeah, so going back to the previous question, with the product, we do ship 2 samples. We ship a gesture sample for multi-touch gestures, and then we also ship a multi-touch tracking demo that allows you to basically track individual touch points. So, yep.
Perfect. And so just to kind of build upon that, so how would one get access to that SVN repository within Storyboard?
So these samples we actually ship with Designer. So if you have Designer installed, you can just go into import sample, and then the gesture one is simply called gesture, and then the multi-touch tracking is called multi-touch tracking.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
That seems to be all the questions we have for today's session. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking time out of your busy day to come listen to us today. And thank you, Matt, for providing great information on incorporating multi-touch gestures into Storyboard-built GUI applications.
Yeah, no problem.
Have a good day, everybody.